let's get away from the logos, the resumes, the who you know, and let's actually see who has the skills. I think we need to just reframe the conversation around like, what are the skills are you assessing for? What is the tooling you need? Why are you not allowing the tooling you'll have on the job to be part of the interview process? Cheating is actually forcing a lot of companies to rethink, how am I interviewing? How am I assessing? Why am I asking that question? Does this question even get at the skill I need to know? And what ultimately are the skills my engineers need to have?
You're very welcome to another episode of Hiring Excellence. I'm Johnny Campbell, your host for today and the CEO and co-founder of Social Talent. Today, we're going to be talking about the evolution and ethics of technical assessment. Everybody's talking to me about assessment lately. It is like this hot topic. How do I assess all this talent? How do I assess the fake talent? How do I figure out signal from noise? Are people cheating? What's going on? Do you know any good providers? Everyone's asking me this question. I know a great provider in this area. I know one particular expert who I love to talk to about this topic. And she's our guest today on the show. She is Amanda Richardson. She's the CEO of CoderPad. She has a phenomenal career in various interesting businesses, all businesses I actually love and have used over the last 15, 20 years. That's a whole separate podcast we could do on CEOs and tech and cool tech that's not here anymore, is being acquired. She'll tell us a little bit about that. I'd like to welcome Amanda Richardson to the podcast. Amanda, you might tell our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe your career, and where are you right now with this background?
Well, Johnny, what a warm introduction. I got to live up to that hype. Thank you. Good morning. I am in Las Vegas today, which is not where I live, nor where I really want to be, but is often where I find myself these days. As we said, all trade shows end up in Vegas. And so I'm currently at URX, which is a university recruiting trade show here this year in Las Vegas. I live officially in San Francisco with my family. I ended up in tech about 20 years ago, kind of by accident, if I'm honest. I moved to San Francisco. I was studying at Stanford, thought I would just stay for 1 year of postgraduate work. And 20 years later, I have done all sorts of product management roles, from hospital technology to actually a stint in HR tech at a company called Snagajob, which many people may be familiar with. Then went on to Prezi, presentation software, Hotel Tonight, which we sold to Airbnb, and now at CoderPad, where we are the leading platform for interviewing and assessing developer talent.
Amanda, it's rare we actually have a founder or representative from our CEO from a vendor these days. You know, most of our audience is TA folks, but actually we wanted to try and get to the expertise and get to the excellence. And I actually think this is an area, assessments is an area that if you run TA, and I don't want to say just run TA, but if you run TA, it's hard to be a super expert on this because you have many, many things to look at. And it is
Mhm.
an area that you do actually require expertise and something you've lived with for the last 7 years or so. Tell us about CoderPad. Why did you join the business? What was it like when you joined? What was it trying to solve for? What was the product back then? And maybe how has that evolved since you joined just before the pandemic?
Yeah, it's been a fabulous 6 or 7 years now. A lifetime, but also just yesterday in its own way, as these things tend to go. I joined the company because we were actually CoderPad customers at Hotel Tonight. So I was very familiar with
Ah,
the brand. Um, our origin story at Hotel Tonight, we had hired a lead for our mobile app development. That person had interviewed at Facebook, had used CoderPad in the interview at Facebook, now Meta. And when we got to, Hotel Tonight, he was expected to build out his team and said, why are we using CoderPad? Everybody's using CoderPad. So I knew of the product, went on with my life, got a call one day that CoderPad was looking for a CEO, someone to come in and really turn what had been a product into a built out company. So when I joined, we were three people in a WeWork. It was just before the holidays, 2019, pre-COVID era, which is like a million years ago in some ways. Um, I was really inspired by what the product does, which is, let's get away from the logos, the resumes, the who you know, and let's actually see who has the skills. Our founder, Vincent, had really struggled in technical interviewing. He was the architect, strongest software developer on the team. That often means you have to do the technical interviews. He would do these interviews often at a whiteboard and then make hiring decisions, recommendations. Those people would sometimes be duds, but the more common problem he had was that he thought someone wasn't good, and then they would go on to build amazing things at Apple or Facebook or all the great companies that exist in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he felt like he was missing talent. And so he said, if I could just work with people for 2 hours, if we could just pair program and collaborate and like build a feature together, I could see how they think, I'd understand where they were strong and they were weak, then I could make a much better hiring decision, if only. And so, that if only became honestly like a tool that he used for himself and then told friends, friends told friends, put up a kind of an e-commerce paywall, and then was off to the races. When I joined, we had about 1,000 customers, and today we have just about 4,000. We serve everybody from Apple, Facebook, Tesla, name your big tech company, but also maybe some unexpected names in healthcare, Allen, CHG, in financial services, the Fed of New York, Goldman Sachs, Citadel Research, Jane Street. We have kind of pretty deep breadth. Anyone who really cares about their technical talent spends time in CoderPad making sure they're getting their hires right.
I love that point you made because I haven't talked to you about this before about um, uh, not trying to identify the false positives, because a lot of us focus on the false positives, who'll
Yeah.
get through, who actually turns out to be poor, but the false negatives, folks who we wean out, end up working for your competitor, building the product that crushes you because we're not there. That's actually a perspective that nobody talks about. Is that like, how often do you come across that kind of that tension where folks are too focused on getting rid of folks who are going to be weak, as opposed to trying to find the true talent they should be hiring, that is hidden in the logo that no one recognizes, at the resume that's poorly written?
Yeah, I think it depends on your perspective and kind of where you come from in talent acquisition. I mean, look, I feel this problem. The talent acquisition teams are flooded with CVs today. It is an overwhelming candidate volume. It is really hard to find who to pass on to the hiring managers and the interview team that's really qualified. And I hear their feedback of like, oh, this engineer, why am I wasting my time on this person? They're clearly not qualified. That is very frustrating. But I think when you're at maybe a smaller, lower branded company, you really do need and feel the pressure to find the person who's potentially overlooked or potentially would be a missed opportunity. And so I think it a little bit varies by where your perspective is. I mean, we feel this at CoderPad. I mean, one of the first developers I hired when we started had a master's degree in biochemistry, hadn't finished college, or excuse me, had a master's degree in biochemistry, but had never finished the CS degree. And honestly, we never would have hired her because we didn't look at her resume. We sent her a project and said, hey, if you want to, we always have this on our website. If you want to apply, here's a project, spend an hour or two working on it and submit back your CoderPad screen. And so she sent it in. It was excellent. We had her build, a common feature we call playback. She did a great job. We picked up the phone. We were like, you don't have a CS degree? You're in biochemistry? Like, what are you doing? And just incredible talent. But again, another person that would have been kicked out because of the resume. But when we saw her skills, she was a great fit and came in and built terrific products for us for a couple years.
I don't think there's anybody left in TA, certainly TA leadership, who thinks the resume should stay. We all hate it.
It's worth anything.
It's awful. Like, I was at an event, we hosted an event with 20 leaders in Barcelona last month, and everyone was like, how do we get rid of this resume? How do we make sure
I
it's...
know.
And what we tend to do is look for a panacea, a solution for every type of candidate that's going to
Yeah.
fix this,
Yeah.
this proxy that we use for scale at the moment, which is a resume, which, isn't very reliable. And to your point, a work test has always been the more reliable way to assess somebody. But talk to me about why, first of all, technical assessment is different to potentially assessing for a salesperson or a customer success person or a forklift driver. And then what has been the history of tech assessment? You mentioned whiteboards for Vincent, your original founder, but tell me through that history. But if you wouldn't mind addressing the question of, is it different for tech than other skills?
Yeah, I think if I'm being honest, I think tech assessments are both probably the most progressive and advanced in terms of assessing and being able to see skills. I also think it's a little bit of the easiest, because you can get a person's work sample pretty easily in 2 hours. Whereas for a salesperson, there's like research and discovery calls and negotiations and a lot of different pieces. And so in some ways I aspire for what we do with technology assessments and seeing skills to be a blueprint for other industries to take on. But I also acknowledge I think we have the easiest place, and it's a habit the tech industry's had for a long time. And so, my mom was a software engineer, started with COBOL in the 60s and punch cards. And back then, when you were, interviewing to be a programmer, or a computer, as it were, it was a lot of math problems. And NASA had just invented this very cool tool called the whiteboard. Compute was very expensive. I guess maybe that's coming full circle. Compute's expensive again today. So they didn't want to give you computer time to see if you could do it. It was too expensive when you were interviewing, but they said, well, show us on a whiteboard, this cool new tool, modern tooling, and show us how you would actually approach it. And the whiteboard interview stuck with us through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. I mean, there are still people probably listening to this podcast who see technical interviews on a whiteboard. Like, just come in, we'll sit in a room for an hour and we'll write out programming. I mean, I always laugh. It's like interviewing an email marketer and being like, okay, great. I want to see how you craft emails. Here's a pen and a whiteboard. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Like, it makes no sense. Like, are you drawing? Are you like, that's crazy. But it's a habit and it was cool. And it's like just what we've done. And so the people who got hired were in a whiteboard interview and, habits and develop. So I think that is where the world has been for a really long time. I think the challenge of the whiteboard interview, other than like not at all showing you if someone has the skills, because who can ever remember, the typos alone. But the whiteboard interview has also become a very intimidating and kind of bias filled process. So there was a great researcher at NC State who did a ton of fabulous research before COVID and things had to shut down, who was studying the impact of a whiteboard interview on the demographics of which candidates passed through to the next round. And it was a small sample size and it was early research, but he found that, you put up a candidate, they had to do a very complicated math problem and they had to describe their work as they were going through the work, doing the whole thing out loud. And they surrounded them with 5 observers, judges. The pass rate was a third of what it would be when you gave the problem they gave the person the problem without an audience. So if you gave the person 45 minutes to sit at the whiteboard, work on the problem, and then we'll come in and talk about what happened, your pass rate tripled. But more importantly, no women ever passed when they were being watched by the audience. Now, that may be correlation, not causation. I don't know. But if we think about like how we're doing our developer interviewing and all the bias that exists in the process, like it kind of starts right there. So that was a little bit of the inspiration. I think cloud technology, it really allowed Vincent to pioneer. He was the first to come up with this idea of a collaborative interview experience in an IDE. It's nothing particularly wild. It's VS Code with a collaboration layer on top so we can pair program together. Before COVID, people did this in the offices. And so this wasn't something that came about post-COVID and remote work. This was how people did. You would go into Facebook for an interview. You would be handed a laptop. The other person on the other side of the table would have a laptop, and you would pair programs together in a CoderPad. So we've come a long way, but we also haven't come that far. We've still got these asynchronous projects, and I still think we need to invest more time and energy as an industry on what this unwatched, unbiased experiences that really better replicates what the job is. Like, no one watches me type, thank goodness, for 2 hours. I mean, if you've ever been on a Zoom call or a Teams call and you like have to share screen and take notes, it's terrifying. So how can we continue to push the industry towards replicating real world projects and real world work where you do a task for 45 minutes and then come back and check in with the lead or the manager and say, how's it going? We've got a long way to go, but at least we're finally getting away from the whiteboard.
You're making me think you don't want to see the rest of my office. You can see this behind me, this control environment, the rest of this shit. Oh my God, if you could see this on screen, you'd never come back. So I totally get that evolution from whiteboards and to this system where, again, you, as you mentioned, you could come in and you're handed one laptop, somebody else has a laptop, you pair a program, and you get that kind of evaluation. Then COVID did hit though, and we moved
Yeah.
to a world where we went on to Zoom or Teams or whatever it was, and then you could, still share a screen, and we moved on, and that, I imagine, was continued to be trusted for several years. But in the last 2 3 years, last year and a half in particular, there's been this massive emergence, and you can tell me if it's true or not, but certainly a suspicion that people can now just cheat, and my AI could be the person on the Zoom call doing this, and it looks amazing, but that might not be me. So we're back to false negatives, right? Or sorry, false positives,
Yeah,
where
right.
it looks amazing. I passed the evaluation. Talk to me about that evolution. What is it justified? Is this stuff happening? And if it is or it isn't, what has CoderPad done about that? What are other people doing, and what do you think about assessments in that world?
Yeah, it is interesting. I do think we have seen, I think AI has made a lot of things easier. I think this is part of the resume problem. I talk to candidates all the time. They say, like, here's the job for, an engineering role as social talent, and here's my resume. Make my resume match this job and be a 100% match in your ATS. So we've completely blown up that process. And, the candidates should be given credit for automating what is,
Yeah,
a
a shitty
very manual
process.
task. Yeah, shitty process, just like the rest of us. You know what I automate? I also automate my emails and all of my writing and all of my presentations. So good on them. So I think where I find it interesting is the companies who are really pushing back and saying, I don't want people cheat. It's cheating to use AI in the interview process. And yet in their job descriptions, it says must be AI fluent, AI skills, whatever it is. When you get there, they're like, here's your access to Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, and you're expected to be proficient. So what I'm what we're really seeing actually, particularly in Bay Area tech companies, is the push towards using AI in the interview. Just the acknowledgement of it is both a skill, and I need to know if you can do it well. Are you blindly accepting what the machines tell you, or do you prompt well? Do you have critical thinking? Do you really understand the subject matter which you're coding, talking about? And so we're pushing for AI use within the interview experience everywhere. Record it, track it, assess it, understand what it is. I do think, though, there are a lot of people who still think it's cheating. And so
Mhm.
the cheating stories, I don't know that I've seen exact data on how many people cheat. I don't know that I've seen exact data on how we define cheating. Is it cheating to have your resume match the job description? I don't know. Is it cheating to get a little help? I mean, life is an open book test, is what I've always said. We put ChatGPT in our product 3 years ago. People thought we were maybe insane, and at least definitely like wasting our time. And what we found was that this was, early AI, didn't have a lot of capabilities and tooling, but you would have your interview screen, and within on the side would be ChatGPT that you could ask questions like, remind me of the function. What was the syntax for this? Just a search box, if you will. And what we found is that interviewers use it more than candidates because the interviewers get stuck.
That's brilliant.
Surprise, So I think we need to just reframe the conversation around, like, what are the skills are you assessing for? What is the tooling you need? Why are you not allowing the tooling you'll have on the job to be part of the interview
Mm.
process? I mean, and then just be clear on expectations. Very few companies have a policy on AI use in their interviewing, which is crazy. Like, be clear with the candidates. When are you allowed? When are you not allowed? We work with Facebook is Meta is incredibly thoughtful about this process. They run 3 technical interviews, one without AI because they want to see your core coding skills, and they're upfront about that. Like, you will not have access to AI if you leave the screen or you leave the window. We will know, and we will ask you why, where you're going. And then one with AI, because we need to understand if you know what you're doing and how good you are. And then one is your choice. Like, if you're a 10x engineer and you feel like AI slows you down, show us. If you're really going to be able to use AI to be faster and more efficient and answer harder problems, that's amazing. We want to see it. And so I think there's a combination that needs to be delivered, and they are incredibly upfront about which stage you're in, what the expectations are, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and also transparently what they're using, right? We're using transcription so that we don't have to take notes, so that we'll have better interviewer notes at the end. But that means it's going through AI, like just being clear about what the features and functionality are in the process.
So we've talked probably a lot about the coding skills themselves and assessing those. But as the tools get better and people are using it to vibe code and to augment
Yeah.
themselves, are you seeing an evolution in the type of skills that organizations are hiring for from an engineering team or in those roles? Has that evolved and is that becoming more sophisticated as well?
Yes, and it's kind of like a return to history and an oldie but a goodie.
Hmm.
So people are now assessing for systems design, which is, a fancy way of saying like taking a big problem and break it down. Like this is the classic consulting case studies, how many gumballs fit in an airplane or whatever the question is. Like, how do you think about the problem? How do you break it into components? Like, systems design has always been a core engineering skill. And I think we got in a bad habit of only assessing it for very senior people. We felt like they were only the ones who needed to know that. But now, with the agents doing the bulk of the coding, everybody needs to start with what is the problem? How do I break it down? How do I compartmentalize it? The other thing we're seeing a lot of is communication and collaboration. We should have been measuring this all the time,
Long time
but
ago.
it was sometimes easier to just be like, that person's not good enough at C++, plus plus, get him out, as opposed to he's kind of a jerk, doesn't communicate well. It's shocking. No one's ever worked with that engineer. But it's much more about, here's the problem, collaborate, but also explain to me like what trade-offs did you make? Why? Why not? I think I'm excited because we're finally also returning to a world where the questions don't have a right or wrong answer. Coding has never been about a, the right answer. My mom would always say developers are like writers. There's many different ways to communicate a story. There are short stories, there are long stories, there are poems. Development is around finding the way that best communicates your story. It's the best way to deliver the feature. You can do it in a few lines of code, you can do a lot of lines of code, you can do it in this language, you can do it in that language. These are all just tools to enable you to deliver your feature. And so, what I think is exciting is we're finally getting to a world where it's why did you choose that language? Why did you choose that framework? What about this constraint? Did you think about this situation? Did you think about that edge case? And less about like, did you actually get the syntax right and the input and the output to pass the test case? So, I think we're going back to where we should have been, maybe, and we were 20, 25 years ago. And I'm excited that I look forward to a world where engineers don't have to study for an interview. That's weird. Like if you're interviewing for a marketing role, there's no like studying. Maybe there's like brushing up on like frameworks and news, but the number of the books that are written about how to pass a technical interview is like heartbreaking. Why are we doing this to our candidates? It doesn't make any sense. They're never going to reverse a binary tree on the job. Why do they have to know what that means for an interview? So I actually think that the tooling, the increase of AI, the abstraction layer around some of the functionality that a developer would have manually done before is like an exciting opportunity to rethink your interviews. And to go all the way back to your point on cheating, what we're finding is people who start in the conversation because they're worried about cheating,
Mm.
or people who maybe have historically sent off a project and you send back a repo or a zip file, or kind of just talked it through, have no fidelity on what work is being done by the candidate, what work is being done by AI, what work is being done by tooling. And so they are really being forced to rethink their process, which is exciting. I think we are in an incredible boom in technical hiring right now. Companies of all industries and all sizes are coming out of the woodwork to say, we've been doing this manually, or we've never really assessed for these skills for the past 20 years. We just had a phone conversation about, tell me about a feature you built and like talk me through some of the technical pieces, but now I can't tell if they did it or not. So I really need a way to see their fingers on keyboard, going all the way back to what Vincent said. I just need a way to work with them for an hour to two to see if they actually know their stuff or not. So I think AI, while we come at this from a perspective of cheating, is actually forcing a lot of companies to rethink, how am I interviewing? How am I assessing? Why am I asking that question? Does this question even get at the skill I need to know? And what ultimately are the skills my engineers need to have?
Can I take you back, Amanda, to
Yeah.
your product days, right? Because we talked a lot about your customers and what they need to assess and what the market's assessing and how you build engineering teams. If you don't mind, let's talk about where you're taking your product and engineering team. Tell me what has excited you about AI and how you've been able to bring that perhaps into your product, where you're thinking it might go in terms of features in the future for assessment capabilities, things you've brought in your own team. So, take off your CEO hat for a second and let's look at the product engineering role and your influence there with your team. What is exciting you? What are you doing? What are you looking at? What are you thinking of? It could be in the product in the future you've already brought in.
Yeah. Well, I think my product and dev team would tell you that given an extra hour in the day, I am poking around in their area. And I don't know if they love it or hate it, but that's definitely what's happening.
Bit of both, I'd say.
Um, Probably, yes, exactly. So, I mean, I think exciting topics we're talking about, that honestly, given the velocity that AI has brought to our engineering teams, may actually ship before this makes it all the way out there. Interesting things we're talking about is how we can help you better with interview guidance. So if you have a rubric and you have a number of questions you need to ask in the interview, how are we the machines can know, like, hey Johnny, we're 25 minutes into this conversation and you haven't asked these 3 questions, you need to move along. Or in question number 1, Amanda never really addressed that point. And so how can we kind of be like a coach, or a little bit of a heartbeat in the day-to-day of the interview? Because look, no one's a professional interviewer. I mean,
Mm.
well, talent acquisition is professional interviewers, but the rest of us are just doing it as a side hustle. And so how can we coach them and help them be better? I think the other thing we're looking at is, or thinking about, is like, what does an interview look like when the agents do the bulk of the work?
Mm.
And so, you start the interview with a candidate, we're going to build a feature, we're going to add, I don't know, aside, this thing to the product. Talk to me about how you would think about that. Okay, this piece. Okay, talk to me about how you would set up the agents and decouple the problem. Okay, do that. Now go. And now for 20 minutes, the agents are writing the code, doing the things, checking each other. What do you actually do as the candidate and what do you do as the interviewer?
Mm.
Like, how do you actually spend your time there? And how do you assess? And so does the interview turn into like a synchronous, then like an asynchronous, and then a synchronous piece? Like, what does that mean? So those are some of the things we're working on. And then of course, it was funny. I was talking to someone yesterday at this university recruiting conference, and she said, well, I imagine you don't need any more engineers with AI. It's made your team so fast. And I said, oh my God, we can't hire engineers fast enough, if I'm
But
being honest, because there's so much more that we're able to build. There's so much cool tooling out there. If we had to build interview transcription on our own 6 or 7 years ago, it would have been a 2-year project. We never even considered putting that on the roadmap. But now with AI, plug in, it's a little bit easier, it's faster out of the box. You can enable all of this functionality. There's so much more that's possible to be built. It's like very exciting. So I think we're seeing just a velocity of how do we help with this top of funnel problem. We've had a video question format for a while. We're going to create a standardized, like, basically an AI interviewer. It's not wildly dynamic because I don't think that dynamic interviews are actually consistent and fair, and the right way to approach that. Hot
agreed.
take, we can do that podcast next. But I do think a standardized asynchronous assessment for the recruiters is necessary with this volume. And so how do you create a 15-20 minute asynchronous AI interviewer phone screen with the technology? The other thing we're seeing and playing with is CoderPad at the end of the day is just a framework, an IDE framework that can have both a web browser as well as an AI component in it. If we can assess how engineers are able to, build a web page with AI, we can now assess how product managers or marketers are maybe able to build a web page or a landing page for their campaign with AI. We can assess how salespeople can use AI to do customer research. So we're starting to get pulled into, like, what I affectionately call technical skills for non-tech roles, because more and more everybody needs AI assessments. And so we have customers using us for customer success interviewing and screening skills assessments.
What
We have our product.
it's such a big question. In the last 3 weeks, I've been inundated with questions over how do I assess AI skills for all candidates?
Call me. This is what we need, because it's become every job is a tech job now. We're all builders. I think this is exciting. And to technology and the dev roles being the early adopters of like hard skill assessments, and maybe because it's like a very manageable job to be able to do that, I think we have the opportunity to do this for all roles now and really get crisp on what are AI skills today, what skills are needed for the job. Can we give the candidate a project in a bite-sized way to see those skills and then assess whether they're good or not? Call me, we're working on it.
So, final question. I know you've got a busy day in Vegas and you love Vegas so much. By the way, I do love Vegas out off the strip. It's just where all these conferences you and I have to go to. It's not the funnest place in the
Yeah,
world.
yeah,
It's great
I'm
to
ready for
vacation.
fresh air, not recycled air.
No, you're not going to get fresh air, I'm afraid, just in the sweltering heat. You've helped implement assessments in so many organizations, so many teams. Apart from product features, of course, what lessons have you learned that you can share with folks who just have a challenge where they're looking to change their assessment model? Do you have any kind of gotchas in terms of, hey, you got to look out for this, don't forget to do this, more around the process of thinking about assessments, thinking about implementing different assessments? Any big learnings you can share with us?
I mean, the learnings are maybe obvious to the talent acquisition audience. We work as much with engineers as we do with TA, and so the gotchas are like, what is the candidate experience? I think it's really easy to get excited about a feature, excited about something that's going to solve a problem for your team. But if only 60% of people are passing your top of funnel assessments because the product's hard to use, is that really why you want to screen people out? Or do you want 95%, 100% of people to get through the assessment, and then you only pass on those that have the score or the level of needed calibrated to the role? So I think thinking about the candidate experience, I think challenging the developers and challenging all the interviewers, frankly, on like, why are you asking that question, and what skill does that actually tie back to? It is some of the basics, but we get in the conversations all the time where you have somebody who's particularly hell-bent on asking one question or a particular syntax thing, and you say like, what does that have to do with the job? And sometimes the answer is, I've always done it this way. Sometimes the answer is, someone asked me this question and I got the job, so therefore I'm good at it. So I think just having that critical eye. And then the other thing that is always a bit of a surprise, but a bridge that we often have to build when they're saying, I don't know what AI skills look like, or I don't, how do I assess AI skills? What are AI skills? What's good or what's bad? And they're not at all connected with their learning and development or the rest of their talent team. And so we work with organizations where you have a learning team that has very clear definition of AI skills and what their rubric is and how they're trying to upskill the organization, and it is completely disconnected for what they're hiring for. And so just, reaching out to your friends in L&D, or even surfacing the questions to managers around like, wow, you really want someone with strong AI skills. Tell me what that is. Oh, well, I just know it when I see it. You'd be like, well, bring up the performance review for your team where you assess so and so at strong AI skills and so at low. Like, can we use that as a proxy for what we're hiring for here?
I love that. I love that, Amanda. It's been super insightful. I've learned so much on this as well. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I didn't get to talk about your illustrious career in Prezi. Didn't get to talk to you about Hotel Tonight. Didn't get to talk to you about your weird insights from those companies, which we had in our briefing call. But that's for another day.
Another day. I would love to do it again.
All right, we'll do it again. We'll call it the late night hiring excellence call in terms of those stories. Lastly, if anyone wants to reach out to CoderPad, wants to know more about the product, any insights, what's the best way to find out more about CoderPad?
Absolutely. Well, I'm very available on LinkedIn, Amanda Richardson. We are also coderpad.io, not .com. Coderpad.io will have a ton of information. Also, we've been working on this, but you can just ask Claude or ChatGPT about technical assessments, and they're up to speed on what we're doing and what's going on. So feel free to reach out, and you can always email me, Amanda@coderpad.io. I would be honored to hear from you.
Amanda, it's a real pleasure. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening this week. Hopefully that's given you some insight in terms of the world of technical assessments, to go back to your team, your boss, your colleagues, give them all the insight, pretend it was all your own, but remember it was all Amanda, and she'll absolutely help you out with more insights if you need her. But do not swamp her LinkedIn. She probably has a bot responding to you. Would that be
No, I
fair,
don't.
Amanda? Yeah,
I'm not that sophisticated yet. I need to get one of those probably.
coming soon.
I'm still a human. I'm still a human somewhere in here.
By the way, this wasn't me. This was the AI Johnny doing this interview today, because Johnny's off having a beer on a Friday evening. It's been a pleasure, Amanda. We'll see you next week with another great guest in Hiring Excellence. Until then, take care.